Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We've got a couple of guests here that I'm going to bring in, but I want to run through a few slides. First of all, some background similar to what I did before. I will direct you all, as I do, to our website. We have recordings of these webinars on there, and this webinar now is being recorded, and it will be available shortly thereafter. I'll go through some slides here, and then we will get into the discussion with our guest panelists here. Just a couple of reminders here on our schedule. We launched on the 29th of March. We had our first two informational webinars on the 4th and the 11th. And Jessica as Winnie from Wise County talked to us about the EMS needs and considerations. And we'll be having another one next week where Francis Bouchard is coming to talk to us about insurance and insurance programs and how they might work in this region. We are on an accelerated timeline, fairly aggressive with this challenge. We have to get everyone, all the winners, under contract by the end of June. So submissions are due May 6th at 2 p.m. Eastern, no later. Once or twice we've had someone try and get their submission at 5 or 10 minutes after the deadline. There are only a few rules in this in the challenge, and it is you have one of them is you have to get it in on time. And so I would suggest not leaving it to the very last minute. May 10th is when we will announce finalists that will be invited to give us additional information and pitch to our selection committee. And that information will be due on May 20th. We will then go to a couple of days of pitches for these companies, and then we'll select and announce the winners in early to mid-June, and we will be getting all the teams under contract by the end of June. If there are any questions as we go through this webinar, please to the audience, put your questions in Q&A or in chat. Paige will alert me to questions as they come up. Just a couple of reminders here, as I did in the past. Riverine flooding. This is the FEMA map of riverine flooding. It is nationwide, and there are a number of states that are interested. We are obviously looking at focused in this little area here, but all up and down the eastern seaboard, the central part of the country are affected by riverine flooding. So we believe that solutions that are developed within this challenge will be scalable, and we need them to be scalable to other communities because they're watching and they want to know, they want to use the what we learn in this challenge and whatever comes out of it. And again, we're focused on these areas here, these 4 PDCs, Planning District Commissions, the Newisco, Cumberland Plateau, which is where our guest today, one of our guests today is from, Mount Rogers and New River here. So we're covering this region. We're just focused on that and their needs, but we want to make sure that any solutions that come out of this process are scalable. I keep going back to that, but that's very important. Just one question, one topic here that is very important. I showed this last week, but this is a greater relevance this week. This is a map of Buchanan County in the Cumberland Plateau, Scotty's area. You see here that there's a couple of there's Hurley and Pilgrim's Knob, Whitewood down here. What we had in 2021, this is a screen grab from the meteorologist broadcast before the event up at Hurley, showing these areas of intense rainfall that were predicted over 48 hours. 6 or 7 inches over over 48 hours is a lot, especially when it comes down in the riverine, in the mountainous communities where it gets funneled through the valleys in ways that are pretty complex. This is Hurley in 2021. it was hit and suffered significant damage. And Whitewood, shown here, in less than a year later, experienced a similar flooding event. So these are real life events. Scotty's organization, that we'll talk about in a few minutes, was closely involved with the relief efforts in both these areas. So we're going to be talking about these events. Just a reminder of the challenge topics. Again, go to the website. There's more information, more details there. We're looking for landscape and building adaptations to protect buildings as possible. An early warning system to alert of significant events and provide avoidance guidance. And third is the scope, structure, and support of a region-wide insurance and support program to help the residents before and after events. The webinars are not aligned to these topic areas because the topic areas of the webinars spread across them. So we wanted to make sure that we got good in-depth discussion about insurance, emergency management services, at the actual encounters that that information that you'll hear can be applied in all three of these topic areas. So this is a very collaborative process. We want to answer your questions. You can bring them up during the webinars or follow up with us afterwards. There's my email address and a QR code to get to our website. But if you have any questions or you need clarification, let us know. We already had some questions for Jessica from last week. We're posting these on our FAQs, but we're here to help. We want you to have successful submissions and to have the best chance you can. So we'll try and help you as much as we can. So on that, after that, I will stop sharing and we'll bring in our guests here. We have two guests today. Scotty Wampler is the Executive Director of the Cumberland Plateau PDC. Hurley and Whitewood, Buchanan County, is in the Cumberland Plateau Planning District Commission area. And his organization was very closely involved with the relief efforts at Hurley and Whitewood. We also have Professor Kevin Kochersberger from the Department of Mechanical Engineering at Virginia Tech. And his group has done some modeling of the Hurley event, of the flows experienced and that developed and were experienced in Hurley. But I'll start off with Scotty, just to understand about these events. Can you tell us what happened either in, let's start with Hurley. What happened during these flooding events, and what was the timeline, just summary as you saw it and you understand it at this point? What happened?
Sure, thanks Paul. Glad to join you all. As Paul mentioned, my organization, the Cumberland Plateau Planning District Commission, does serve 4 counties here in the far coal fields of southwestern Virginia. One of those counties being Buchanan, and 2 unincorporated communities in that county, Hurley and Whitewood, of course, as he mentioned, were ravaged by floodwaters in 2021, 2022. If you noted on the slide that he showed with the riverine flooding and the color scale, the little corner of Virginia that we're talking about is one of the dark red splotches there. So very, very high risk area. Flooding, unfortunately, is fairly commonplace for us here. We are typically insulated from a lot of natural disasters. We don't have, a lot of major tornado activity or earthquake activity or anything of that nature. But flooding we are very prone to, simply because of our challenging, I guess is one way to put it, terrain and topography that creates those funnel situations where mountain water, groundwater, simply flows at such a high rate, and the volume of that water at such a rapid pace that it's very difficult to prepare for. Specifically in Hurley and Whitewood, the events are quite similar there in 2021, 2022, just due to that mountainous landscape. What we saw just the ravaging of personal property, homes, loss of E911 communications in some areas, if I recall correctly. We're of course a very rural area, and many of our cellular towers that do exist in areas that are sparsely populated are backfed by a fiber optic network. And when you have a major power outage or a break in that fiber due to a major event like this, for instance, that can cause a loss of E911 comms instantly. Those homeowners dealt with needs for emergency transport out of the area. In a lot of these areas, we're talking about regions of Virginia where you have not really what you would consider a standard street grid system, but just to use a little bit of Southern slang, a lot of back haulers, as we might call them here, hollows. And in many of these communities, there can be one way in, one way out, and that means when those roads are impeded by floodwaters such as these, like we saw in Hurley and in Whitewood, residents in those areas can be stranded. No way in, no way out. Emergency personnel cannot get in, residents cannot get out. That's a huge concern, and obviously was part of the situation here. In the aftermath, dealt with a great deal of debris removal problems, which frankly are still being dealt with, or the county is trying to deal with those, not just as it relates to personal property, but also streams. Brush and uprooted trees, and man-made objects that were dragged into these streams, and due to a variety of factors, some cost and others regulatory, those situations have not been rectified either. But just to boil all that down into a quick little point, I'm trying not to be long-winded here, but I think what we saw is the biggest need in these two specific situations is simply the warning system, or lack thereof, is terribly inadequate. And I'm not sure what that answer is and how to develop a solution there to solve that kind of problem. One where flooding events in these areas, it's not a situation where you can receive an alert from the National Weather Service. You have 45 minutes or 60 minutes to evacuate, and then your family is safe. It's not like that. When in these areas, by the time any of these homeowners receive any sort of alert through one of those typical systems, it's too late. We're talking minutes. The waters rise so rapidly and flow so quickly in these areas that, I mean, it's Paul, you and I have been in some discussions on this already with county officials there. I mean, we're talking anywhere from 8 to 10, 12, maybe 15 minutes max. So in our minds, the way we think about this problem, that's really the key issue, is finding a way to develop some sort of more sophisticated warning system to help these folks. So I'll stop there and let you guys move on, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, so I've got one more question for you, Scotty, and then we'll turn over to Kevin here. The United Way stepped in, and they raised $1 million very quickly in both instances, and helped out the residents with handouts and grants and
Sure.
a number of different things. That's not really sustainable, nor is the legislative appropriation of $17 million and $18 million for Hurley and Whitewood, respectively. That's why we're sort of looking at the insurance side of things,
Right.
to see if there's an insurance program that could provide the residents what they need when they needed it. Do you believe there is a good understanding of what residents need before, right after, and then a month or a year after the event, or is that something that needs to be built a little bit more?
I certainly believe it needs to be built a little more. And Paul, to your point, yes, we did have some pooling of resources that occurred, more slowly than we would like to have seen. Although, when you're dealing with the gears and the pulleys and the arms of local and state government, nothing moves quickly. I mean, that's just the nature of things. But through the efforts of the United Way of Southwest Virginia, as well as appropriations made by the General Assembly, the state legislature here in Virginia, yes, there was a pool of resources that developed, created for these two situations. But when you're dealing with events where dozens upon dozens of homes are impacted, automobiles, livestock, you just on down the line, even $15 million, just to use a round number, it just doesn't really go that far. And when you're talking about that scope, that level of personal property damage.
So thank you for that. And I will point out to the audience that a big part in our insurance topic area is accumulating and understanding the needs of the residents at these different time intervals before, right after, and other time periods thereafter. People need something within an hour after, a few hours after the event. It's different than what they need when they try and rebuild a month later or whatever. So that is an area that needs to be developed further. I'll go to Kevin now. So Kevin, you had developed and modeled the Hurley event. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you set that work up and what sort of things you modeled in the data? And I'll preface this by saying the data sets that Kevin has developed are available if you ask us for them at no charge. They're kind of complex and big, so we're not sort of just throwing them out there. But if anyone wants them for their submission, just let us know. We'll get them. So go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And full disclosure, I'm going to bring Danny Whitehurst into this picture quickly. He's is he going to show up? Oh, okay. So Danny's the graduate student who's been responsible for a lot of this work. I wanted to give him credit for it. We had been down to Hurley after the flood event in 21, and then we also visited Pilgrim's Knob, and we took a couple of aircraft and mapped the areas pretty extensively to look at the post-flood terrain. And then we use that to create updated flood models, and the results are dramatic because you can see that if there is a second event, it's going to be considerably worse than the first one. So a couple of things we can do with these high resolution models that we create. One is to assess areas before any event occurs, and then run a couple of different flood analysis tools that we have to determine the severity of the event, how it's going to impact existing houses, what, we can run simulations on a particular high intensity rainfall and see what percentage of the houses would be impacted, if they're going to be completely covered up with water, if the hydraulic pressures are going to be such that the buildings are going to be destroyed. We can also then use these predictive tools we have in the post-flood side of this to look at what could be expected after an initial event. So, how bad will it get if there is a second flood event? And so this information is good for determining how infrastructure can be rebuilt or how it can be built in the first place, to inform residents on where not to build, where building would be acceptable. And then ultimately, we hope to take these drone-based image data sets and then use those as ground truth against satellite imagery, so we can continually update our models with satellite imagery that's collected on a 1 to 2 day cycle now, we can constantly monitor situations as they change. So even a minor flood event may change the stream condition to the point that it sort of triggers a more severe flood scenario that could happen in the future. The other thing we can do is satellite imagery, as we can monitor for debris flows. Again, another hazard in highly sloped terrain where the earth gives way and you're going to have a landslide event. So that can be also part of our monitoring, continuous monitoring that occurs with satellite imagery. As Paul said, we do have data sets for the SWOT and the HEC-RAS analyses that we've run in these areas. We're happy to share those to any degree that the participants would want. They're available. I think the easiest thing, though, is to really reach out to us and ask specifically what you're interested in. And we're going to continue this work. We're going to keep our eyes open for any future events that may be occurring, and we're going to, because we're in Southwest Virginia to begin with, we can get on site within a couple of hours. So we're hoping to work now that we've got a precedence for conducting these missions, collecting the data, we can deploy pretty quickly and get down and get updated maps post-event, and then go ahead and work on our analyses of what the situation would be the next time.
Yeah, and we heard in previous discussion on the from Jessica that in some cases, it's not just the building getting washed away. The water actually goes under the building, scours the landscape, and takes the home away. So as you were saying, Kevin, knowing where the landscape has been changed and scoured, that's a place you would probably not want to build again. So this is important information for the planners and
yes, and just to add to that, I think what we saw at Hurley, and Scotty can help me with this, but it appeared that Department of Transportation, the Buchanan County, the town, they all had their and the electric utilities, they all had different plans to restore the area. And of course, Virginia Department of Environmental Quality also has a say in stream restoration. So a lot of these agencies weren't necessarily talking to each other. And I think this is a consideration for anyone who's looking to enter this challenge, is to provide data sets and information across agencies so that sharing and the most efficient process can be used to do the restoration and the reconstruction that's required. Otherwise, you have VDOT that has its own design on how to rebuild a road, but that conflicts with VDEQ, and then Virginia Department of Emergency Management is concerned about access to residents. So all of these agencies really need to, I think, could benefit from this work to harmonize a response.
Yeah, and we will be trying to facilitate that during the time of the challenge. Is there anyone on the any of the attendees that have any questions for our experts here? Just raise your hands electronically or put something in the chat. We will try and Speaker Pollard, go ahead.
Oh, there we go. Now, can you hear me okay?
Yep,
okay.
Go ahead.
Thanks, guys. This is a great presentation. Paul and I have known each other for a good while, and I do a lot of work on the legal side and policy side on coastal flooding resilience here and inland flooding more and more. So this is of great interest to me personally and professionally. But a couple things I just thought I'd mention. One of the other factors that can happen is, to the degree you have industry alongside these rivers that are flooding or affected by flooding, you have the concerns about what happens to the facility itself. So not just residential issues, but also industrial facility impacts. And that is not just what can happen on that site, but it's also the job situation for those workers. They may not be able to get to the work. They may not be able to, so you have you have that kind of other economic impact or economic development impact even for the locality that goes with these issues, in terms of the facility's ability to get back on its feet, or, you know, is it the company make a decision, we just can't rebuild, it's not worth it, particularly if it's an older facility, we need to relocate somewhere else. So I think as you think about these issues, one of the other factors is this sort of what happens with the business community and how does that interplay with the residents and the overall community ability to stand on its feet after something like this. The other thing I was going to say is on some of this coordination with the agencies, this is a constant challenge to coordinate with the Corps of Engineers on stream restoration work, DEQ as well. VMRC actually has jurisdiction in some places for state-owned bottomlands. So you've got all these different agencies in the mix. And one of the things though that's kind of could be an interesting opportunity out of this, as it turns out, is doing this restoration work. If it's possible, you may have the opportunity to create a stream restoration project that actually builds, not only restores what was there, but actually enhances what may be there. And possibility of actually generating stream mitigation credits that could be sold in the marketplace, and that may be a source of revenue. That would be very site specific, and whether the juice is worth the squeeze on that is anybody's guess. But just trying to think of creative ways to try to recapture some costs, and that the community might be in a position to do that. All the coordination with VDOT as well goes into that. So anyway, just a few thoughts on that front. Just thought I'd share those things. Thanks.
Thank you, Speaker. Scotty, did you have any thoughts on the what Speaker was explaining about? Could some stream restoration or some of the businesses that are on streams be protected here?
I mean, not in great detail, Paul. You know, just other than to say, you know, at our heart, at our core, we are an economic development, community development based organization. So that's certainly something that's going to be first and foremost on our minds. You know, specific to the events in Hurley and Whitewood, you know, those are not employer heavy areas. They're largely residential areas. So these events, you know, don't really apply in the same way there. Although, you know, in what is considered quote unquote downtown Hurley, although again, Hurley is an unincorporated community, but you know, there are a handful, you know, of key businesses that do exist in little pocket areas, but large scale employment, not really. But more broadly, I certainly agree with the speaker wholeheartedly.
Kevin, we got a question here just in our last few minutes that came up in the Q&A. How do you address antecedent conditions in the model, like change in soil moisture, for example?
Yeah, I can lean on Danny for some of the specifics, but in using the soil water analysis tool, is that correct?
Soil and water assessment tool, yeah.
Soil and water assessment tool, SWAT. It takes in a number of variables, including the prior conditions of the soil moisture content and you know, the land cover. So it would have to accommodate the, you know, if there's trees or bare land, how much water is retained by those types of land cover. You know, historical precipitation, all that goes into the SWAT model. But then once you have the event, it knows what the capability of the ground is to absorb water or not absorb water. And then that's going to change the flooding, particular flooding condition that you're analyzing. So we do have the ability to pretty quickly determine, you know, some historical events or historical rainfall occurrences and how that's going to impact the current analysis.
Okay, thank you. So that takes us to time. Sorry it's so short, but I really appreciate Scotty and Kevin, your participation here. This input is so important to successful submissions to our challenge. So thank you both again, and I'd like to thank everyone who attended as part of the audience, and thank you for your questions. And we will keep them going on the FAQ page. So thank you, everyone, and thank you for taking the time this afternoon.